So in this video, I thought I'd just show you the kind of medical things that I've carried on this particular trip. So on this trip, Tom and I are here by ourselves. We're in Bolivia in the high mountains of the Andes, and we're doing sort of independent mountaineering journeys. We're carrying all our own gear in our bag, which means obviously weight and pack size is really important. We're quite remote, but not on most of our sort of mountains. We're not super remote. Usually the base camp is only a few hours walk from the roadside. There's no mountain rescue sort of formal system here, but there are certain companies that do provide helicopter assistance if you need it, and you pay for that. So bearing all that in mind, I've tried to think about what to carry in my bag. So I'll just go through, and obviously this is not necessarily prescriptive. I'm not saying this is the correct thing for everyone to be carrying. It's just what I've decided for this particular trip for Tom and I. Okay, so I've got kind of two setups. One is some kit that I keep down at base camp and have sort of resupplies of back at the hotel down in the city in La Paz, and then I have stuff that I actually take up on the mountain. So for example, yesterday we were doing a mountaineering journey up to a 5,300 metre peak from our base camp here at about 4,700 metres. So it's really quite high altitude. We're still acclimatising, and I'm trying to keep my weight of my bag down while still being useful. So firstly, I keep all my medical kit in some sort of dry bag. I always carry a SAM splint, or it doesn't have to be a SAM, that's just a brand name, but basically a foam splint is absolutely excellent for splinting broken bones, broken wrists, arms, ankles, that kind of thing. It's got multiple uses. Really cheap, really lightweight, practically weighs nothing, and can easily be slid down the back of a rucksack. So I think that's a really valuable piece of equipment. I quite like this sort of bag because it has a few different compartments, so it helps me to know where my kit is when I'm tired, hungry, hypoxic at high altitude. So I've got a few sort of sections that I keep things separated in. I've got my sort of life-saving equipment, which hopefully won't necessarily be needed, but if it does, then it's there. So I've got a Goodell airway, so an airway adjunct in case of airway compromise because of, say, head injury, unconsciousness due to head injury, or HACE, high altitude cerebral edema, or any other reason why you might become unconscious or have an airway issue. I've got a brake cannula in case of wanting to decompress a tension pneumothorax or something like that, or pneumothorax. Probably very unlikely, but really lightweight and potentially life-saving. Same with this, really lightweight, easy to use. Then my other life-saving bits and bobs are my altitude drugs, which I keep in a separate packet in that compartment, and I always write down the doses on the front so that if you're tired, hungry, hypoxic, you don't need to remember doses of things. It's written there. And also if I was the one to become unwell, and Tom, who has decent first aid training but isn't a medical professional, he knows what to do to treat me. On this particular trip, I've decided not to bring injectable, IM or IV altitude drugs for various reasons, so I've only got oral. So I've got acetazolamide, otherwise known as Diamox. I've got nifedipine to help with HAPE, and I've got dexamethasone to help with HACE. And then I've also got a few other drugs that I carry onto the mountain. I always carry some sort of antiemetic. So for this trip, I've got some metoclopramide. I always carry some diarrhea relief, so loperamide, just in case you get caught short up there. It's not the best place to be having disasters. And then some simple paracetamol and ibuprofen, so simple analgesia for pain, and something a little bit stronger, so cocodamol. And that's all I've actually got for pain relief on the mountain. Obviously there's loads of other options, I could have packed Penthrox, for example, but yeah, it takes up more space. And although it's a really effective drug for pain, it doesn't last for hours and hours and hours, so you've got to compromise somewhere. So yeah, that's all I'm carrying for pain. And then in the main compartment is mostly just really basic dressing stuff. So I'm really obsessed with K-tape, kinesiology tape. I think it's excellent for lots of different reasons. I use it mostly for feet taping, for hot spots and blisters, combined with this fleecy web, which I just think is fantastic. These two are my absolute go-to for foot care. But kinesiology tape is also fantastic for supporting joints and limbs, so shoulders, knees, ankles, that kind of thing. And it's got good evidence behind it for sort of joint support, which is great. And of course, it can also be used as a bandage if you wanted to, you know, splint a broken limb or something using the SAM splint. You could then tape it on into place, nice and secure with that. So multiple uses. I've got a bandage, you know, similar reasons obviously for bandaging things like a SAM splint on, or for bandaging a wound. A little bit of wound glue. I've got some gloves here in case there's any sort of blood and messiness that I need to deal with and I want to keep myself safe. I always carry a couple of tampons. The most common times I've used these at high altitude on expeditions, working, is for nosebleeds. But yeah, you can pack a wound with that, because obviously it's designed to soak up blood, so it's great. I've also got a sanitary pad as well, just for, you know, just in case if I come on a period unexpectedly. But also, it's also just, you know, again, really effective at soaking up blood, so it's really useful as an extra, you know, dressing or wound care item. A few little patches and dressings. Yeah, a few more dressings, just sort of different range of sizes for wounds, and a few smaller ones like plastery style things. Some really basic, you know, antiseptic wipes you just get from the supermarket. Some steri strips again for wound care. Then I also carry a pair of tough cuts. That's quite a bulky, heavy item really. I've decided that I do want them because obviously we're wearing lots of thick clothing, and although, you know, you want to try and keep cutting clothing in the mountains down to a minimum because you don't want to expose people too much, if there is a wound or you know, broken bone that you really need to get to, you're just not going to be able to manage to do that without a pair of tough cuts really. And then last but not least, I have my casualty card. If there's anything really serious that happens and I want to just do some documentation, casualty card on waterproof paper and a pen. I think they're really quite useful, especially if there's a serious incident and you're waiting a long time for help, or, you know, it's a long evacuation process, because you're going to start to forget things like what drugs have you given, what time did events happen, and it also just really helps you, you know, when you're tired and stressed and you know, suffering with the altitude and stuff, helps you go through exactly what you need to be doing, what else to look for, and of course it helps the ongoing care of that casualty. You know, so say if Tom or I got injured and ended up in hospital, at least the hospital would have a record of what happened and, you know, what was given to that person in terms of drugs and things like that. So that's what I carry up on the hill, and then back at base camp I have just a few more supplies of the things that I use a lot of. So a whole roll of my K-tape. I have a oxygen or a SATS probe, so it measures oxygen saturations in the blood and also heart rate. It's not, you know, necessarily totally essential. I mostly just carry it because I'm a geek and I'm interested. But obviously we're at really high altitude on this particular expedition, so it is useful to have with us, especially if one of us does become unwell. It's just another tool. Again, just more supplies of the kind of blister management and a few more dressings. And then some more drugs down at base camp. So I like to keep my drugs in these like pouches and separate them so they're nice and organised. And it's mostly things like top-ups of the simple stuff like the pain relief. I also have some antihistamines in there. And then in this one I have some antibiotics for various different issues. So chest infection, gastrointestinal infection, urine infection. And I have some laxatives as well. I have some diurolites or sort of rehydration sachets, and so that's what I've carried up here. And so far, sorry, I've just got to fly my sunglasses. So far, not had to use much of it apart from some of the simple analgesia and the foot care stuff. But, you know, hopefully we've got a range of things. As I say, some of the more important life-saving stuff and some of the more simple things that are going to be used more commonly. And try to think about things that are hopefully mostly lightweight, mostly have lots of different uses. It's all relatively cheap, doesn't take up too much space in the bag, but hopefully, you know, is there for the sort of critical stuff and the more common stuff.
Please follow, subscribe and share, and please get in touch if there's any topics that you'd like me to cover.
If you want to learn mountain medicine in more detail, check out my online courses, Cold, Illness and Injury, Humans at High Altitude and Women's Health for Mountain Adventures. I'm for anyone who's interested in mountain medicine, and they're self-paced courses so you can do them at home in your own time.